Welcome back now for the news in detail. We start from Iran, whose President Hassan Rouhani has said Tehran will not allow anyone to violate its borders. He was addressing a ceremony in Tehran commemorating the start of the Iran-Iraq war. Rouhani said the presence of foreign forces in the Gulf is a threat to the region and its oil industry. The president added Tehran will present a plan at the UN to secure the region with help of regional countries. Earlier, Saudi Arabia said it will take appropriate action against Iran if it is proven complicit in the recent attacks on Saudi oil fields. Talking to the media in Riyadh, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Adil Al-Jubair said Saudi Arabia is consulting its allies on its course of action. Australia has refused to be part of any US-led military conflict with Iran. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the country's commitment is limited to protecting freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. Addressing the media in Washington, the Prime Minister said Canberra will make all decisions according to its own national interest. Speaking on his talks with US President Donald Trump, Morrison said only Australia's role in ensuring freedom of navigation was discussed.
The other matters that are being pursued by the United States are matters that they're pursuing. And I made it very clear when we announced our involvement in that arrangement that it was very much about that freedom of navigation issue, and that's what it is about, and that's appreciated. And
the UK says it is implausible that attacks on Saudi oil facilities were conducted by Yemen's Houthi movement. British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said currently available evidence makes it unlikely that the Houthi movement was behind the attacks. But Raab declined to say to who may have actually been targeting Saudi oil facilities. It said responsibility will only be attributed after things are absolutely crystal clear. It said credibility will be a key to building wide-ranging support for any robust action against those found responsible. The United Nations has welcomed a proposal from Yemen's Houthi rebels to halt attacks on Saudi Arabia. United Nations envoy for Yemen Martin Griffiths says the rebels' initiative could send a powerful message of peace. The UN envoy called for taking advantage of the rebels' offer to reduce violence and military escalation. Earlier, the group pledged to stop attacks on Saudi Arabia if coalition forces do the same. Speaking on the group's Al Masira TV, head of the Houthi political office Mahdi al-Mashad called for serious talks among all stakeholders. The announcement comes after last weekend's drone strikes on Saudi oil installations reduced half of the kingdom's production. The Yemen civil war has killed 10,000 people and pushed millions to the edge of starvation. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says he will expose Indian Prime Minister Modi's fascism. Khan is in New York to speak at the United Nations General Assembly section. The Premier met founder of Kashmir Study Group Farooq Katwari in the US and discussed the crisis in occupied Kashmir. He said Islamabad is highlighting New Delhi's illegal annexation of the valley's special status. During the meeting, Katwari highlighted the group's engagement on the Kashmir dispute and efforts for conflict resolution. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the Prime Minister will meet several heads of state and speak to reporters on the issue. Now, over 500 Indian academics and scientists have condemned New Delhi's lockdown in occupied Kashmir. In a statement, they called for an end to the undemocratic communications blackout and the release of detained Kashmiris. The academics said students are unable to contact their families. They said the Indian government's decision to open only landlines has failed because it covers only 1% of the whole valley. They also sought a transparent investigation into violations of human rights in the occupied territory. Well, apples are Kashmir's largest revenue-generating crop, but the people of occupied Kashmir have refused to sell their harvest to the Indian government. Prime Minister Modi's government launched a program to buy crop directly from the farmers, but it has failed completely. Officials said the government had announced it will buy 67% of the crop from Kashmiri growers. Official data shows less than 1% of the growers have registered for the sale of their crop. Locals say Modi's digital India has crashed in the longest ever curfew in the valley. Kashmiris are unable to contact families, apply for jobs or admissions online. New Delhi's lockdown in occupied Kashmir has now entered its 49th day. Moving on, 26 people died and 12 others injured when a passenger bus rammed into a mountain in Pakistan's northern Diyar region. 10 Pakistan Army soldiers, 4 women and 6 children were among the dead. Police said the vehicle was travelling from Skardu to Rawalpindi when it ran into a mountain at Babusar top. The added rescuers had trouble reaching the area due to its difficult terrain. Meanwhile, in Libya, 18 people have been killed and dozens injured in heavy clashes south of the capital, Tripoli. LNH spokesman Ahmed al-Mismari said the army had launched a large-scale offensive against the government at Tripoli airport and the Kazirma front lines. Mismari said 7 LNA troops were killed in the fighting along the airport road and dozens were wounded. Government officials said 11 of their soldiers were killed and many wounded in the capital. Khalifa Haftar's forces launched a military operation to take over Tripoli and overthrow the UN-backed government in April. The fighting has so far killed and injured thousands of people and displaced over 120,000. Human Rights Watch has called on the Egyptian government to release protesters detained during anti-government protests. The Egyptian police arrested 74 demonstrators protesting against President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's rule. Human Rights Watch has called on the government to protect the people's right to peaceful protest. It demanded the authorities to take all necessary steps to avoid a repetition of the past atrocities. HRW said Egypt's international partners should call on the government to respect people's rights to freedom of expression. Thousands of protesters have taken to the streets of Cairo demanding el-Sisi's resignation. Such demonstrations are rare in Egypt after unauthorized protests were effectively banned in 2013. Moving on, Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has ordered the formation of an investigation committee over the 3rd June massacre in Khartoum. The Sudanese Council of Ministers said the Independent National Investigation Committee will have 7 members. The council said members will include independent lawyers and members from the Judiciary, Defense and Interior Ministries. The rights groups accuse the Sudanese military of killing over 100 protesters outside the army headquarters. After months of turmoil, on August 21, Abdallah Hamdok became the first civilian prime minister of Sudan since 1989. Hong Kong police and pro-democracy protesters have clashed in a shopping mall in Sha Tin City. Protesters took refuge in the airport shopping mall after smashing the nearby train station. Transit authorities closed 2 immediate stations on the airport express train. Police stormed into the mall and fired tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. Hong Kong has imposed new curbs on rail travel ahead of planned protests targeting the airport today. Earlier, hundreds of protesters have lined on roads in a hand-holding demonstrations after a night of widespread violent street clashes. Protesters are occupying the airport arrivals hall and blocking approach roads in Tangshan town.
We were aware that there were protests about midday today, yes.
It was in the paper.
That's why we came to the airport early, thinking that our flight was delayed, but it turns out it's been delayed till tomorrow, so we shouldn't have come out.
Colombia's President Ivan Duque has sought further international sanctions on Venezuela. He said the embargoes will stop President Nicolas Maduro's alleged support to Colombian rebels from destabilizing Latin America. Duque said the international community must understand that dictatorship must come to an end. He said action should be taken against Venezuela for allegedly protecting terrorism in its territory. President Duque has said any aggression by Venezuela's armed forces would immediately trigger a regional response.
When they decide to enter Colombian territory, we'll be here waiting with all of the strength of the armed forces.
Former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden has called for a probe into reports that President Donald Trump pressed his Ukrainian counterpart to investigate Biden and his son. Biden says, if true, Trump's decision to pressure President Volodymyr Zelensky was outrageous. The charge alleged that Biden threatened to withhold U.S. aid unless a prosecutor looking into a gas company was fired. Biden's son worked in the same company and could have benefited from that action, which falls under conflict of interest. Biden said Trump's actions are an overwhelming abuse of power.
Why is he on the phone with a foreign leader, trying to intimidate a foreign leader, if that's what happened? That appears what happened. You should be looking at Trump. Trump's doing this because he knows I'll beat him like a drum. And he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
In the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party has got a 15% lead over the opposition Labour Party. In an opinion poll ahead of possible national elections, the embattled Prime Minister still has a healthy lead. The Conservatives garnered 37% of votes in the opinion poll, while the Labour Party took 22%. The result comes after a difficult first few weeks in power for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The Premier's critics accuse him of suspending Parliament to avoid a debate on Brexit, an allegation he denies. Meanwhile, the Scottish Government has requested £52 million to prepare for a no-deal Brexit. Scotland's Finance Secretary Derek Mackay reiterated the government's opposition to any form of Brexit. It's time for a short break. More news to come up now. Welcome back. Now, in Albania, over 100 people have been injured after a 5.6 magnitude earthquake jolted the country. The Defense Ministry said the epicenter of the quake was near the port city of Durrës. It said it was the most powerful quake to strike the country in 30 years. The ministry spokesperson said no deaths were reported following the quake. People came out in the streets in several cities as the quake damaged 10 buildings and triggered power cuts in capital Tirana. After the quake, Albania's Prime Minister cancelled his scheduled trip to the United States. Teenage environmental activist Greta Thunberg says young people are united in demanding action against climate change. Addressing a UN Youth Summit in Climate, Thunberg said the worldwide protests held on Friday are just the beginning of the movement. Young Argentine activist Bruno Rodriguez said the climate and ecological crisis is the political crisis of this era. Addressing the summit, UN Chief Antonio Guterres said young people must ask world leaders to preserve the environment for future generations. He said world leaders talk too much but listen too little. The UN will host a climate action summit next week with many world leaders to discuss climate change. In Bolivia, native Andean people make up for the half of the country's population. Indigenous women, known as cholas, have long been stigmatized for wearing their traditional clothes. The polera is a big and heavy garment made with up to 6 meters of cloth. The traditional skirt is a source of pride and empowerment for indigenous Bolivian women. But since President Evo Morales, an indigenous Bolivian himself, came to power, things have begun to change. The garment is now seen in offices and public spaces which had previously banned the garment.
Now, with this anti-discrimination law, young women are getting back in contact with their roots and can really show off and wear their poleras.
The 2009 Bolivian constitution recognizes 36 official indigenous languages. A law passed in 2010 also prohibits and penalizes racism and discrimination.
They could tell you to leave a place after they pass the law. Nobody can remove you from a place, but you suffer and nasty moment, there is always someone who can approach you, as has happened to me, and they can say to you, for example, "It disgusts me that you're here."
Some people think prejudice persists in Bolivia due to illiteracy. According to a local activist and radio host, there isn't less racism in Bolivia today. Instead, bigots only express themselves in a different manner. For now, the debate around the Polera continues. Local women stand by their traditional dress, saying it gives them the strength to claim what they are. Wheat is a staple in diet the world over. Today, the crop's global supply is threatened by the rising population and climate change. Taking note of this, China has dedicated a team of scientists to increase wheat production.
Chances are you have eaten a piece of bread today already, but few know wheat genetics are far more complicated than similar food items, such as rice or potatoes. Its genetic code was unlocked a few years ago after years of research. Now scientists are trying to figure out new ways to increase its yield and nutritional value. In China, a team of scientists in the Shanxi province has been put to work to increase its resistance to disease and environmental damage.
After we deciphered this code book, we can further explore the life process of wheat from the molecular level to have an in-depth analysis of its growth, development, and its reproduction.
Right now, the scientists are trying to find high-yield wheat varieties which can adapt to a diverse range of environments.
With the genetic information, we will use the strategy of molecular design in wheat breeding to utilize the genetic information of wheat. In this way, we can design and breed according to meet our needs. In that case, we will have breakthroughs to have better nutrition, resistance, and quality of wheat.
China is the world's largest producer and consumer of wheat. Its wheat crop has been updated 7 times in the last 70 years. The scientists in Shanxi say there is still plenty of room for more innovation.
Harry Potter took flight in the French Alps over the weekend. This was part of the ALPS Cup, which is the world's coolest paragliding competition. This report has more.
Harry Potter, a giant yellow duck and a stormtrooper were some of the brave pilots running off a cliff edge in the French Alps. Around 130 pilots from France and beyond flew paragliders during the ALPS Cup. This is for fun. I mean, we fly all year. I have a flying school. I fly 200 hours per year. That's really for the spectators, to please them and to enjoy ourselves at the same time. The wacky event has been hosted every year since 1987, when a costume category was added to the regular paragliding event.
This is always a great feeling, always. This is our 5th edition. We come from Italy, so this is so beautiful to be part of this. Yes, we share an emotion with everybody, with people from France, with people coming from the other side of the hemisphere.
Today marks the end of the 3-day festival. Organizers estimate around 100,000 spectators attended the carnival.
Now let's have a look at the weather update. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for now. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.